Chapter 1541. However, when she walked out, all she saw was a cloud of dust on the mountain path, and the young man in red was nowhere to be seen. He left just like that? The woman stomped her foot and bit her lip. She had not even asked for the young man's name. In the night, a white horse and a young man in red were rushing along the mountain path. As they galloped, the night wind blew against their faces, making their eyes hurt. Lao Bai asked as he ran, "Master, is it really okay to leave that beauty there? What if she gets into danger?" In his opinion, the woman was beautiful and had a voluptuous figure. If she went on the road alone, she would be in danger. If his master was willing to bring her along, perhaps he would not be so worried. Hearing this, Fangzhou curled his lips and revealed a wicked smile. "Lao Bai, when we get home, I'll find you a female horse. How about I let you settle down?" "Master, I'm a mutant. How can a normal horse be worthy of me?" No. As they galloped in the night, his voice was scattered by the wind. The man and the horse chatted until they saw a small village when the sky gradually brightened. "Master, we have a small village. Let's go and rest." As Lao Bai spoke, he had already started walking towards the village. "When we enter the village, don't open your mouth to speak, or you'll scare people," Fangzhou instructed. "Okay, I know," Lao Bai replied. It answered and then closed its mouth. Following the village road, they saw some people carrying hose or 2 wooden buckets out of their houses in the morning. Some of the roofs had smoke rising in spirals. It was obvious that they were already preparing breakfast. Fangzhou dismounted from his horse and led Lao Bai to a house. He knocked on the door. "Is anyone home?" The simple wooden door creaked open, and an old woman came out to open the door. When she saw Fangzhou, who was dressed in red and looked as handsome as an immortal, she was startled. She asked cautiously, "Young master, is there anything I can help you with?" Seeing that it was the old woman, she smiled and asked, "Elder, I'm passing by and would like to rest here. Is that okay?" "Of course you can. It's just that my house is simple and crude. I hope young master doesn't mind." As the old woman spoke, she opened the door and invited Fangzhou in. Seeing the horse in Fangzhou's hand, she said, "Young master, this horse can be tied to the wooden stake in front of the door." "All right," she responded and tied Lao Bai to a wooden stake in front of the door. She patted his head and gave him a few instructions before entering the wooden house. "Young master, there isn't anything good in the house. Please don't mind and just eat a little." The old woman brought Fangzhou a bowl of millet porridge, a small plate of pickled vegetables, and 2 pumpkin pancakes. Looking at the farmer's snacks, Fangzhou smiled and squinted his eyes. He quickly expressed his gratitude. "Thank you, elder." Out of the corner of her eye, she caught a glimpse of a 5- or 6-year-old boy with a ponytail poking his head out and staring at her curiously. "Is this your grandson?" She looked at the child and asked with a smile. "Yes, he's my grandson." The old woman revealed a loving smile and waved at the little boy. "Xiao Hu, come out and greet young master." The little boy blinked and shyly looked at Fangzhou. He ran out and hid behind his grandmother. Chapter 1542. Seeing this, Fangzhou took out a box of pastries from her space and handed it to the child. "Here, this is for you." These were the pastries she bought for the journey, but she didn't eat much on the way. "How can I accept this?" The old woman hurriedly refused. Looking at the exquisite box of pastries and smelling the fragrance of the pastries, she didn't dare to accept it. Ordinary people like them wouldn't eat such things, and they didn't dare to accept it. "It's okay. It's for the child. Take it." She squatted down and opened the box, revealing the exquisite pastries inside. "It's very delicious. Take it." The little boy's eyes lit up as he looked at the pastries in the box. He couldn't help but put his little finger into his mouth. His eyes couldn't move away from the exquisite pastries. "Young master, this..." The rich people who passed by in the past looked down on the villagers and never gave them things like this. For a moment, the old woman didn't know what to do. "It's okay. It's just a box of pastries." She stuffed the pastries into the child's hands. "Take it." The little boy hugged the box of pastries that Fangzhou stuffed into his hands. His innocent little face couldn't help but reveal a happy smile. "Thank you, big brother. You have to call me young master," the old woman hurriedly said. "Thank you, young master," the child said crisply. He quickly ran to the back with the pastries and shouted, "Grandpa, Grandpa, there are delicious pastries. Young master, you eat first. There's more if it's not enough," the old woman said and walked inside. Fengzhou sat down and ate millet porridge with side dishes and pumpkin cakes. The breakfast was simple and refreshing. After breakfast, she rested in the room that the old woman vacated. She planned to sleep and leave at noon. Until noon, the old woman knocked on the door. "Young master, lunch is ready. Get up and eat." The door opened and Fengzhou, who had slept, walked out. She was about to leave, but at the old woman's invitation, she sat down and had a meal. After chatting with them for a while, she got up and said goodbye. "Don't worry, old woman. If I see your son, I'll definitely pass on your message." She rode on Lao Bai's back and waved at the old woman. She reined in the horse and left. "Grandma, Grandma, look," the little boy came out with a few gold coins. "That big brother gave it to me." The old woman looked at the gold coins and took them with trembling hands. Her lips moved, but her eyes were slightly red, and she didn't say anything for a long time. She sped up her journey and arrived at Huanyan City in the evening. She rode a white horse into the city. Her handsome face, outstanding temperament, and red clothes were extremely dazzling. As soon as she entered the city, she attracted the attention of many people. She was already used to this kind of target. She sat on Lao Bai's back and only dismounted when they arrived at an inn. The waiter hurriedly came out and helped her lead Lao Bai to the stables at the back. "Waiter, give me one of the best rooms," Fengzhou shouted and walked upstairs, saying, "Give me a few more specialties and a pot of wine." "All right, this way please, young master." The waiter led the way and poured a cup of tea for her after they entered the room. "Young master, please have some tea first. The dishes will be served soon." The waiter retreated, and before long, the dishes were served and placed on the table. Just as he was about to leave, he was called out. Chapter 1543. Hearing this, the waiter turned back and replied with a smile, "It's not far, just a few streets away. However, it's not easy to enter the city lord's mansion recently. If young master doesn't have any connections, I'm afraid you won't be able to enter the city lord's mansion." Fengzhou's eyes moved slightly, his eyebrows slightly raised. "Oh, why is that?" "Young master is not from here, so you don't know. The old city lord has been ill for 2 or 3 months, but no one can cure him. Not long ago, the city lord sent out a message saying that as long as someone can cure the old city lord's illness, they will promise him one thing unconditionally. Therefore, doctors and alchemists from all over rushed over to give it a try." Speaking of this, the waiter laughed. "Now, the city lord's mansion is surrounded by people from morning to night. Other than some doctors and alchemists, there are also some spectators and some rogue cultivators. Therefore, it's not easy to enter the city lord's mansion. Even if you are a doctor or an alchemist, not every one of you can enter." Fengzhou drank a cup of wine and poured another cup. With a flip of his other hand, a gold coin flew out into the waiter's arms. "Continue. Tell me everything you know." When the waiter received the money, and it wasn't a silver coin but a gold coin, his eyes immediately lit up and he hurriedly told Fengzhou everything he knew. After a long while, he left. After eating, Fengzhou went out to walk around, thinking of finding out the direction of the city lord's mansion. He also wanted to see if it was really as the waiter said, that there were doctors and alchemists outside the city lord's mansion. He didn't expect that when he arrived at the street outside the city lord's mansion, he would be surrounded by so many people. Just as the waiter had said, in addition to doctors, there were also alchemists. Moreover, their strengths varied. Among them, there were even people wearing the robes of the Danyang sect. From the looks of it, his illness hasn't been cured yet. However, an old city lord is ill. Even if the city lord can make any request, why would it attract so many people here? She whispered softly, feeling a little surprised. She had only come here because she needed the exquisite rainbow flower to concoct the medicine. But the doctors and alchemists there all had badges hanging in front of their chests, indicating their status and rank. It was a little strange that they were huddled here and discussing in low voices. Of course it's for fame. A voice sounded. Fengjiu looked over and saw a doctor in his 30s standing next to him with a face full of anticipation and excitement. This old city lord's illness is something that many people have failed to cure. Moreover, because old city lord Duan has a wide network of friends, and his family has many outstanding talents in various fields, the old city lord's illness has been treated by several famous doctors and alchemists, but none of them have been able to cure him. If there is someone who can cure him, he will definitely become famous. With such an opportunity, who wouldn't want to give it a try? Fengjiu's gaze moved downwards, landing on the badge on his chest, and then faintly moving away. With so many people, not everyone can see the old city lord. Right? Of course. Since the old city lord's health is not good, he naturally can't meet so many people. Only 10 people can enter each day, and these 10 people must be selected after a test. Chapter 1544. Hearing this, Fengjiu's lips curled into a smile. I was just walking around with nothing to do. Seeing so many people here, I got curious. This is not a place for you little kids. Go play wherever you want. Hurry up and leave. He waved his hand and said, I'm almost 20. I really have nothing to do with being a little kid. She said with a smile. Being called a little kid was really awkward. Ha ha ha. 20? Do you know how old I am? She looked at the man in his 30s and raised her chin. Fengjiu smiled and asked casually, how old? He looked like he was in his 30s, but his bone age was definitely more than that. I'm 108 years old. However, I haven't married yet. I was just thinking that if I can make a name for myself, then I can marry the city lord's daughter. That would be killing 2 birds with 1 stone. He looked at the city lord's mansion with a yearning gaze. His eyes lit up as he said, it's said that this city lord's daughter is 16 years old this year. She's the #1 beauty in the city. Moreover, she's a beauty with a high cultivation level. Hearing this person's age, his goals and plans, Fengjiu's mouth couldn't help but twitch. An old man over 100 years old dared to covet a 16-year-old girl? His skin was really thick. Perhaps it was because he saw Fengjiu's twitching mouth. That person laughed and said, for us cultivators, what does being 100 years old mean? Hundreds of years old can be found everywhere. If one can truly become an immortal, their lifespan will be as long as the heavens and earth. What's so strange about that? In comparison, isn't my 100 years old just like a teenager? That's right. That makes sense. Fengjiu nodded in agreement. Immortal cultivators couldn't be compared to mortals. Mortals in their 60s and 70s were rare, but immortal cultivators could do it in the blink of an eye. The higher one's cultivation level, the more one could maintain one's peak appearance. It was just like this 100-year-old alchemist who had a 30-year-old appearance. In the immortal cultivation world, there were many old couples and young wives. After all, when a man had strength, how could he not have beautiful and enchanting beauties by his side? However, this person wanted to marry the city lord's daughter, the #1 beauty in the city. His skin was really thick. One look and one could tell that he was a useless person. If he had the ability, he would have gone in long ago. Why would he still be standing here boasting shamelessly? She shook her head inwardly and turned around to leave. However, her sleeve was pulled by that person. She immediately raised her hand and brushed that person away. The man staggered back several steps and was brushed away by a strong force. He almost fell to the ground. After he regained his footing, he felt ashamed and shouted at Fengjiu, You little child, how can you be so rude? Fengjiu glanced back at him and said indifferently, Sorry, I'm not used to people touching me. As he spoke, he had already walked away. Seeing that Fengjiu had apologized, the man didn't pursue the matter. He only shook his head and said, Young people these days really don't know any rules. He ignored him and squeezed to the front to talk to the other alchemists. After strolling around the streets for a while, she returned to the inn to take a bath. Then, she lay down early to rest, preparing to go to the city lord's mansion early in the morning to take a look. The night passed peacefully. When dawn came, she went out after breakfast. As usual, she was wearing a dazzling red robe and dressed like an elegant young master. Chapter 1545. Where did this young man come from? What are you doing squeezing so close to the front? Go away, go away. Don't make trouble here, go somewhere else to play. What are you doing here, little kid? Hurry up and leave. Don't delay our business. The alchemists and doctors in front were thinking hard and discussing matters, but when they saw a red-clothed young man squeezing his way forward, they all spoke out to chase him away. Fengzhou glanced at them and said, "Please make way. Make way. Kid, do you know where this is? Do you know who you're talking to?" An alchemist who looked to be in his 40s shouted in a deep voice, and at the same time, he stuck out the badge on his chest that represented his identity. Fengzhou glanced at him and said leisurely, "What does it have to do with me who you are? Please make way, you're blocking my way." The alchemist who had never been ignored like this showed anger on his face. He was a pill ancestor. He was a pill ancestor. Moreover, he was a high-level pill ancestor. This young man actually dared to speak to him in such a tone. He was really too arrogant and impudent. You actually dare. Before his angry voice fell. He was stunned by the scene in front of him, and he couldn't say a single word. His eyes were filled with shock, and he looked at the red-clothed young man in front of him with a face of disbelief. He saw that Fengzhou casually took out a badge and pinned it on her chest. That was a Pill Ancestor's badge, which was one level higher than a Pill Ancestor's badge. Perhaps 1 or 2 Pill Saints could be found in this entire city, but it was impossible to find a Pill Ancestor as young as this young man. Moreover, if this young man only took out the Pill Ancestor's badge and pinned it on her chest, it would be fine, but after he pinned the badge, he flicked the red robe on his body and actually reached into his sleeves. Not long after, he took out another badge and pinned it on her chest. When they saw the badge that the young man had pinned on, the surrounding people couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. The originally chaotic crowd that was discussing the matter all quieted down at this moment. The atmosphere was so quiet that it was strange. It was so quiet that even a pin drop could be heard. It was because it was the badge of an alchemy saint, the badge of an alchemy saint. Regardless of whether it was an alchemy saint master or an alchemy saint master, any one of them would definitely be a peak figure in any place. They would definitely be figures who would be revered by tens of thousands of people. However, the scene before their eyes only made them feel disbelief and strangeness. That type of emblem, that type of extremely difficult sacred expert emblem, extremely precious, how could it possibly be in the hands of a youngster? Moreover, this young man was the owner of 2 badges at the same time. This was simply too unbelievable. Not to mention the previous alchemy grandmaster who couldn't utter a single word at this time. Even the surrounding people couldn't make a single sound. Was this scene real? How could such a young man already be a saint alchemist and saint alchemist? Not to mention here in Tuan City, even if it was placed in other places, there wouldn't be such a freak like him, right? Chapter 1546. No, nothing. The alchemy grand master stammered and hurriedly retreated to the side, not daring to block Fengzhou's path. As soon as Fengzhou put on the 2 badges, the city lord's mansion's people had already gone in to report. What? There's an alchemy saint master outside? Moreover, he's also an alchemy saint master? He actually has 2 alchemy saint master badges at the same time? In the main hall, the city lord was in disbelief after hearing the guard's words. Is this true? Are you sure? Can't be wrong. Many people outside saw it, but this person is very young. He looks like he's not even 20 years old. Hearing this, the city lord stood up and walked back and forth in the hall. After a long time, he said, "I'll go take a look." As soon as his voice fell, he walked out. When he came outside, he just happened to hear the scene in front of the city lord's mansion. At this moment, a red-clothed youth stood at the front. The surrounding people all retreated, making him, who was already conspicuous, even more dazzling. Examination? Gee, do you think I have nothing better to do than come here to play with the examination? You can leave this for others to use, but it won't work on me. Fengzhou sneered and glanced at the middle-aged man who advocated the examination with a lazy expression. It was normal for the city lord to set up an examination in front of the city lord's mansion, but it was not normal for her to use it. For someone who had 2 Alchemy Saint Master badges, if they really stopped the examination, where would she put her face in the future? What's more, they were the ones who were seeking treatment. How could she beg to come to their door? She came to the city lord's mansion for the medicine, but she would not come to their door and beg them to let her treat it. A doctor must not go and pull others. If she really did that, not only would she lose her status, but it would also make people doubt her medical skills. She would not do such a thing that did not please her. Otherwise, she wouldn't have taken out 2 badges and put them on. Since she took out 2 badges, it was to tell them that she had strength that they could not compare to. Young master. A low voice sounded, attracting everyone's attention. When everyone saw who it was, someone said in a low voice, "It's the City Lord." City Lord Duan came out. I didn't expect City Lord Duan to come out. At this moment, everyone had mixed feelings. They did not expect that after waiting here for so long, hoping for a chance to make a name for themselves, they would not even be able to step through the City Lord's gate. Meanwhile, this red-clothed youngster who came from who knew where was actually someone with 2 sacred expert emblems. What was the most difficult for them to accept was that this youngster really was a youngster. His bone age was precisely that of less than 20 years of age, not like them who had youthful appearances, but whose bone age was already several tens or even over 100. They tried everything they could to meet the city lord, but to no avail. As soon as the youth pinned the 2 badges on, the city lord himself ran out to greet him. Just thinking about it made him feel really good. Fengzhou looked in the direction of the voice and saw that it was a middle-aged man dressed in black. He had an extraordinary aura, and his face seemed vaguely familiar, which made her feel a little strange. "Young master, I am the city lord of Huanyan City. Please come in and talk." The city lord made an inviting gesture to Fengzhou and invited Fengzhou in. Chapter 1547. In the main hall of the city lord manor, the city lord sat on the main seat and asked, "How should I address you, young master?" "My surname is Feng." She took a sip of tea and said slowly, "So it's young Master Feng. My apologies." He cupped his hands and said with a smile, "Young Master Feng, you have 2 Holy Master badges at such a young age. You're really not simple." "City Lord Duan. Let's not beat around the bush." She put down the teacup and looked at him. "I heard that the old master's health is not very good." "That's right." He nodded and said, "I've asked many people to take a look at my father, but none of them could cure him. I wonder if I could trouble young Master Feng to take a look? If you can cure my father, young Master Feng can just say the word. As long as I can do it or have something in the manor, I can give it to young Master Feng as a reward." A 300-year-old 7 colors exquisite flower. She looked at him and said, "I want this spiritual herb." Hearing this, City Lord Duan knew that the young man in front of him came for this spiritual herb. He was slightly startled and nodded. "Sure. As long as young Master Feng can cure my father, I'll give you the 300-year-old 7 colors exquisite flower in my manor. Where's your father? Lead the way." She stood up and patted her robes. "Young Master Feng, this way please." The city lord immediately stood up and led the way. Following City Lord Duan to a courtyard, Fengzhou glanced at the guards guarding the courtyard and raised his eyebrows. The guards inside were actually nascent soul cultivators. It seemed that the City Lord Manor was still very powerful. Under the City Lord's lead, they entered the master bedroom. When they arrived at the inner room, they saw the unconscious man lying on the bed and were surprised. The man on the bed looked to be around 30 years old. He was very young and handsome. No matter how they looked at him, he didn't look like the City Lord's father. However, Fengzhou checked his bone age with his divine sense and understood. This man should be the City Lord's father, the previous City Lord. Even though he looked young, his bone age was already quite old. However, he was a fairy realm expert. With such strength, it was normal for his appearance to be at his peak. When she first saw the City Lord, she felt that he looked somewhat familiar. Now that she looked at the city lord's father who was unconscious, she suddenly understood. No wonder he found this person familiar. Duan Mu Bai's face in Danyang Peak was 60 to 70% similar to this person lying down. It seemed like the Duan clan in Yen City should be Duan Mu Bai's clan. She didn't expect that the exquisite rainbow flower would actually come to Duan Mu Bai's house. However, why didn't he come back when his family was in trouble? Young Master Feng, this is my father. He is a fairy realm expert. However, 2 months ago his body started acting strangely, and recently he fell into a coma. Many doctors couldn't find anything wrong with him, even after checking on him. At this time, Feng Jiu had already reached out to check his pulse, and then unbuttoned his clothes to check his body. When he saw a slight bulge on his waist, his eyes could not help but narrow slightly. At first, I was worried that he had been poisoned, so I asked the doctor to do a blood test, but he didn't find any poison. The city lord said from the side, feeling a little nervous. He did not know if this young man in red could save his father. Chapter 1548. Hearing the city lord's words, Feng Jiu didn't say anything. Instead, she glanced at the slightly swollen waist and examined his head. After a long while, she withdrew her hand and left. If I'm not wrong, there should be a type of spirit-devouring insect called the black and white impermanence in his body. At most, he has 7 days left to live. She slowly walked out of the room as she spoke. When the city lord heard this, he couldn't hide the shock on his face. He stared blankly for a moment, then glanced at his father on the bed. He had a servant girl help him put on his clothes and quickly followed Feng Jiu out. Young Master Feng is saying that there are insects in my father's body? How is that possible? How could insects hide in the body? Moreover, cultivators can see the inside of their body. If there were insects in his body, how could his father not know? How is it not possible? Doesn't your father have 1 male and 1 female in his body? Hearing this, the city lord opened his mouth in disbelief. 2? And 1 male and 1 female? This. Because of the shock in his heart and those words, he didn't know what to say for a long time. He only felt that it was inconceivable. However, right at that moment, the red-clothed youngster took something out from his sleeve. Soon he took out a thick book. He watched as the youth flipped through it and finally pushed the book in front of him. Look, this is the insect. At first, it was only as thin as a strand of hair and its body was only this long. It was black and white. As it hides in a person's body and absorbs spiritual energy and blood essence, it gradually grew larger. Moreover, the strangest thing about this insect is that it's male and female. Your father is using his own body to raise these insects. It would be strange if they didn't die. You're saying that my father raised them himself? He asked with wide eyes in astonishment. That's right, your father raised them himself. He used his own body to raise these spirit-devouring insects. Moreover, there's one on each side of his body. There's a legend about spirit-devouring insects. They're rare treasures that are raised with essence and blood. I'm guessing that your father raised them for this reason. However, he suffered a backlash and will probably die in a few days. Looking at the information recorded in the book on the table and hearing Feng Jiu's words, he hurriedly walked into the room to check his father's left and right sides. Just as Feng Jiu said, there was a slight bulge on both sides of his waist that resembled a wriggling worm. He couldn't help but jump in fright. He hurriedly ran out. Young Master Feng, then, can my father be saved? Please, you have to save my father. She rolled her eyes. Black and white impermanence black and white. Impermanence? How could he be saved just because he wanted to? Moreover, these insects now that how can they be so easy to get rid of them? It was rumored that if one fed the spirit-devouring bug with one's own blood and fattened it up, it would be forced out and refined into a blood pill, which had the miraculous effect of bringing the dead back to life. However, this was only a legend. It was fortunate that old man Duan dared to test it with his own life. Now, the insects were fattened, but he couldn't take it anymore and collapsed. His actions, in her opinion, were purely courting death. He was really too good at tormenting others. Then there's no saving him? My father can only wait for death? City Lord Duan staggered back with a face full of shock. Chapter 1549. Hearing this, City Lord Duan's despairing heart was reignited with hope. He hurriedly asked, "What do you need? Please tell me, young Master Feng." His father was like a big tree in the Duan clan. He definitely could not let him fall. Fengzhou glanced at him and said unhurriedly, 1,000-year chilling ice bed, 9 tendrils purple spiritual grass, and 2 9th-level ice spirit cores. Hearing these 3 things, City Lord Duan frowned. These 3 things, there is only 1 9th-level ice spirit core in my City Lord's manor. I don't have the other 2. However, young Master Feng, don't worry. One of the clans in the city has a 1,000-year chilling ice bed. As for the 9 tendrils purple spiritual grass, I will find it as soon as possible. 3 days, prepare these things in 3 days. Fengzhou stood up and said, although he still has 7 days to live, the latest is 3 days later. Okay, I will get someone to do it immediately. I will also personally go to the clans in the city. Young Master Feng, I will get someone to bring you to rest first. He gestured to Fengzhou. Get someone to bring my horse to the inn, she said as she walked out. No problem. After City Lord Duan arranged for someone to receive Fengzhou, he hurriedly left and headed to one of the large clans in the city. That clan practiced the ice soul cultivation method. A few years ago, they obtained the 1,000-year chilling ice bed from a black market auction. The 1,000-year chilling ice bed, which was useless to others, became the best aid for their clan's cultivation. It was just unknown if they could borrow the 1,000-year chilling ice bed from their clan. On the other side, Fengzhou, who was strolling around the Duan clan, came to the garden pavilion and sat down. A servant brewed a pot of tea and waited on him. Since there was nothing to do, he looked at the servant girl beside him and asked, "Who is Duanmu Bai in your manor?" Hearing the red-clothed young master ask about something that the entire city knew, the servant girl was stunned and hurriedly said, "He is our city lord's younger brother, our manor's second master." Fengzhou raised his eyebrows. He doesn't come back often? He rarely comes back. I heard from the other people in the mansion that the second master has been cultivating in the Danyang sect since he was young. He is now a disciple of the 3 Yang Peak Master. Then your second master isn't married? She propped up her chin with one hand and asked curiously. The maid lowered her head and took a step back. She said, "Young master, I can't say anything else. Talking behind my master's back is disrespectful. Please don't make things difficult for me." Fengzhou smirked. "All right, I won't ask anymore. There's tea here but no pastries. Go get some." "Yes," the maidservant responded and left. While Fengzhou was drinking tea, admiring flowers, and eating pastries in the city lord manor, the entire city was alarmed. When the various powers heard that 2 young masters with 2 sacred expert emblems arrived in the city, they all found this hard to believe. Is that true? It's really the alchemy sacred expert and alchemy sacred expert emblems? A family's patriarch couldn't hide his shock as he asked the people below. It's true. The news has spread throughout the city. That person wore the emblems in front of all the alchemists and healers outside the city lord manor. They all saw it clearly. Is that person still in the city? The family patriarch on the main seat asked. Yes, he is still in the city lord manor. When he heard what was said, he stood up and thought inwardly, regardless of whether it is alchemy or pill refinement, those who can reach the level of sacred master are definitely not ordinary people. Even in this city, it is absolutely impossible to find someone who possesses both of these emblems. If I can become friends with this kind of person. Chapter 1550. Hearing this, the family head was a little surprised. City Lord? Why is he here? Quickly lead the way. As he spoke, he stepped outside to welcome the guest. Haha! City Lord Duan, how did you find the time to come here? Please come in, please come in. The family head cupped his hands and smiled, inviting City Lord Duan to the main hall. Brother Meng, how have you been? I came in a hurry today and really disturbed you. Please forgive me. City Lord Duan smiled and cupped his hands as he followed family head Meng inside. After entering and landing, family head Meng asked, "I heard that a young master wearing the 2 saint badges came to the city lord's mansion this morning? At this moment, why isn't the city lord receiving guests at home, but running over to my place? Is there something you need?" City Lord Duan said directly, "I won't hide it from Brother Meng. I came here today to ask for a favor." "Oh, what is it?" He was a little confused. What kind of favor would make him come here to ask for a favor? It's like this. City Lord Duan told him simply that he needed the 1,000-year chilling ice bed to treat his father's illness. He hoped that City Lord Duan could lend him the 1,000-year chilling ice bed. After hearing this, family head Meng smiled. "So it's about this?" He nodded, indicating that he understood, and said, "City Lord, I've placed this ice bed in the ice cellar. What do you think of this? When the time comes for the treatment, please invite the old man over. Don't worry, I'll tell them not to disturb the old man's treatment." "All right, then I'll have to trouble Brother Meng. I'm in a hurry to collect the other 2 things, so I'll take my leave first." Family head Duan stood up and cupped his hands. "I'll see you out." He personally saw him out. After he left, he thought to himself, the city lord's father's illness had been treated by many people, but none of them could cure him. Now, this person could diagnose him and treat him. It seemed that he really had some ability. That's right, if he didn't have any ability, how could he have 2 saint badges? On this day, the city lord ran around, hoping to collect the things he needed within 3 days. In the city lord's mansion, Fengjiu, who everyone was curious about, wandered around for a day before arriving at a garden in a courtyard. It was said that the exquisite rainbow flower was planted in this garden. However, when she approached the courtyard, she saw that there was a formation set up inside. With some curiosity, she probed the formation and walked in. After walking around for a while, she passed through the array and arrived at the inner area. As soon as she entered, she saw a small garden with all kinds of spiritual flowers and plants. It was surrounded by a wooden fence, and every stalk of spiritual medicine was extremely rare and precious, which surprised her. He didn't expect the Duan clan to have so many spirit flowers. However, why was there no one guarding such a place? She glanced around and saw no one around. Then she slowly walked in. Her gaze swept across the spiritual flowers and finally fell on a spiritual flower that was placed in the middle. This is the exquisite rainbow flower. Not only can it be used as medicine, this flower is also extremely beautiful. She softly muttered and stopped to look at the exquisite rainbow flower. She looked at the 7 colors flowing on each petal. The flower was as beautiful as a rainbow, and she couldn't take her eyes off it. Chapter 1551. It was the corner of a plain white robe that was hidden among the flowers. She was a little surprised. She didn't feel anyone here. Moreover, even when she saw the corner of a robe, she didn't feel the slightest fluctuation of aura. So this person was just an ordinary person who didn't cultivate? She slowly walked forward and saw that it was a woman. However, she seemed to have fainted there. What surprised her the most was the woman's face. "It's her." She was a little confused. Wasn't this the woman she had saved on the road? Why was she here? However, upon closer inspection, she felt that something wasn't quite right. Miss? She called out twice and went forward to help the woman in. She casually checked her pulse and couldn't help but be slightly startled. She lowered her head slightly and looked at the woman that she had helped up. So it's not the same person. No wonder it felt so strange. There was something different. Then are they twins? She softly muttered as her gaze fell on the woman's face. She was a woman with an outstanding appearance. She wasn't the type of beauty or absolute beauty, but rather the type of delicate beauty. Although they had the same appearance, their temperaments were very different. Even though the woman was unconscious, her entire body exuded a tranquil aura. The aura on her body was extremely quiet. It was because of this that she didn't notice that there was someone here when she came in. Glancing at the spirit flower in front of the woman, she first helped the woman out of the garden. When she came to the pavilion outside, she saw that there was still paper and a charcoal pen on the table. On the paper was an unfinished painting. She took out a small bottle from her space and unscrewed the cap. She brought it to the woman's nose. Not long after, the woman slowly woke up. Fengzhou put away the bottle and picked up the charcoal pen to write on a piece of white paper. "You're awake? You fainted just now because you smelled too much of the purple dado flower's fragrance. You can't smell the purple dado flower for too long. Be careful in the future." The woman blinked her eyes and stared at the red-clothed Fengzhou in a daze. Her face was filled with curiosity and surprise. She looked at Fengzhou and then at the paper that Fengzhou brought over. After reading the words on it, the woman revealed a sweet smile. She nodded at Fengzhou, took the paper and pen, and wrote 2 sentences on it. "Thank you, you're really pretty." Reading the words, Fengzhou laughed and wrote on the paper, "A few days ago, I saw a girl who looked exactly like you. Are you twins?" A smile blossomed on the woman's face as she wrote on the paper, "She is my little sister." Thus, Fengzhou followed the woman to the pavilion beside the small garden and chatted with her using pen and paper. Because, from the examination of her pulse, he found out that this woman could neither speak nor hear. When the sky darkened, the people in the city lord's manor turned the entire manor upside down, but they still couldn't find Fengzhou. They thought that the red-clothed youth had left and hurriedly reported it to the city lord. After running around for a day, the city lord returned home. When he heard that the red-clothed youth was gone, he couldn't help but be startled. He slightly frowned and asked, "Did he ride his horse away? Did someone see him go out?" Chapter 1552. The city lord frowned. After a moment of thought, he said, "He should still be in the manor. Where have you guys not searched? Go look for him again. Only the eldest young Miss Full Moon Courtyard is left. However, there is a formation outside the eldest young Miss Courtyard. That young master shouldn't have been able to enter." As the housekeeper spoke, he saw the family lord sweep his gaze over with a dark expression. "What do you mean by shouldn't have been? Are you treating him as an ordinary person? Can an ordinary person have 2 sacred expert emblems?" As soon as his shout fell, he walked inside with large strides while instructing, "Have the manor's people stop randomly searching. He should be with Yingying. I'll just go take a look." Seeing this, the housekeeper hurriedly instructed the manor's people to stop searching. Then he quickly headed towards Full Moon Courtyard. No one would go to the eldest young Miss Courtyard, so why did this red-clothed young master run there? It really made them look for him. At this time, Fengzhou's mood was just right. Apart from having an extremely pleasant conversation with this woman called Duan Yingying, what surprised her the most was that even though she couldn't hear or speak, her culinary skills were unexpectedly good. Because it was getting late, in order to thank her, she brought her to the kitchen to make a meal for her. After walking around the courtyard, she found out that there was only Yingying in this large courtyard. The city lord's manor was so large, and there were so many servants, yet there wasn't a single person to serve her. One had to understand that she was the eldest young miss of the city lord's manor. She sat at the stone table outside the kitchen, looking at the dishes piled high in her own bowl. She smiled and helped her pick up some food with her chopsticks. Then, she indicated for her to hurry and eat. However, she saw her look at her with a face full of joy. She put down her chopsticks and picked up a charcoal pen to write on a piece of paper. "I'm very happy today. There's finally someone to eat with me." When she heard these words, her heart ached. Looking at her pure and innocent smile, she felt a bit upset. The city lord clearly had 2 daughters, but the outside world only knew of one. Meanwhile, this one lived in this courtyard in obscurity, never taking half a step out of the manor, never hearing the beautiful sounds of nature in this world, never saying a single word. 2 people with the same appearance had completely different fates. "Young Master Feng?" City Lord Duan's voice rang out at this moment. She turned around to look at the person who had come, only to see him walk forward in surprise. Looking at the simple yet exquisite dishes on the table, he asked in astonishment, "Why is young Master Feng here? Was he here to see the exquisite rainbow flower? How did he know that the exquisite rainbow flower was planted in this courtyard?" "I accidentally entered the courtyard and met Miss Duan. I happened to be hungry, So Miss Duan invited me to a meal. City Lord, do you want to join us? She smiled faintly as she looked at City Lord Duan, who was standing to the side. Hearing this, he looked at his daughter who stood up from the table and smiled. He raised his hand and gestured, "Sit. Don't just stand there." He then asked the housekeeper behind him to bring another set of chopsticks and bowls. He then sat down and said, "I just came back from outside. Since young Master Feng is eating here, I naturally have to accompany him. However, these dishes are a bit too simple. How about this? I'll get someone to prepare a few more dishes and send them over." "Don't worry about it, this is enough." Feng Jiu smiled at Duan Yingying, who couldn't hide her joy. Chapter 1553. Feng Jiu shook his head. "No, I think this is good. This courtyard is quiet, and with such an understanding Miss Duan accompanying me, it's not boring. It's good that young Master Feng likes this place. Come, young Master Feng, please eat. After dinner, I'll take you to see the exquisite rainbow flower. That spirit herb is planted in this courtyard and will be taken care of by my daughter." "Okay." Feng Jiu's eyes flashed. After glancing at him, he picked up his chopsticks and began to eat. After chatting for a while, the three of them walked to the small garden after dinner. Although the sky was already dark, the exquisite seven-colored flower in the garden was still emitting a faint halo, appearing extremely beautiful in the night. "Young Master Feng, I visited a few families outside today. Now I have the 1,000-year chilling ice bed and the 2 9th-grade ice crystal cores. As for the other spirit herb, I found the local black market and they said they will deliver it to me in 2 days. Within 3 days it should all be here." Speaking of this, City Lord Duan could not hide his joy. Finally, those 3 things were settled. This allowed him to put down the huge rock in his heart. Now all that was left was for him to treat her. After speaking, he paused for a moment, glanced at his daughter and said to Feng Jiu, "Young Master Feng, may I ask you to stay in this courtyard for the next 2 days? This courtyard is quite big, and there are many rooms here." Hearing this, Feng Jiu glanced at him with a faint smile. "City Lord Duan is quite assured of me. Young Master Feng is an honored guest. I thought that since young Master Feng and my daughter hit it off at first sight, my daughter can accompany you for the next 2 days. Moreover, the exquisite rainbow flower is in this courtyard. I think it may be more suitable for young Master Feng to stay here." She smiled and glanced back at Duan Yingying. "Since that's the case, then I'll stay in this courtyard. With fresh flowers and beauties as my companions, it's indeed pleasing to the eye." As a result, Feng Jiu stayed in this courtyard. Duan Yingying, who was in the same courtyard, did not have the slightest awareness of the inconvenience of a man and a woman living in the same courtyard. In her opinion, it was fine as long as the two of them did not live in the same room. She did not care about reputation like those so-called noble young ladies outside. At this moment, Feng Jiu didn't know that she was about to meet someone she hadn't seen in a long time. The next morning, a bearded and stocky man wearing a black robe walked in from outside the city gate. Because of his slovenly appearance, he looked like a man in his 30s or 40s, which was a little scary. He held a long broadsword with a round handle in his hand. As he walked, he looked majestic and murderous, causing the people on the street to involuntarily avoid him and open up a path for him. After seeing the stocky man in black robes, some cultivators secretly sized him up and whispered, "This person's murderous aura is so heavy. I can tell that he's not someone to be trifled with just by looking at him. His aura is restrained. What's emitting from his body is not the aura of spiritual energy, but the aura of profound energy. Moreover, it's the aura of a peak martial saint. Who is this person? With the strength of a peak martial saint, he's definitely a strong person. That's right. This kind of profound energy cultivation is already comparable to the peak masters of the Black Tortoise sect." Chapter 1554. Waiter, a pot of wine, a few meat dishes and rice. After entering the restaurant, he found a place on the first floor by the window and sat down. He then shouted with a voice like thunder, revealing a sense of refreshment. "Okay, sir, drink your wine first. The food will be served soon." The waiter served a pot of wine and left. Not long after, he brought a few meat dishes and rice. "Sir, if it's not enough, you can call this little one." After saying that, he left. The people in the restaurant looked at the black-clothed man after he came in. When they saw him sitting by the window eating meat, they didn't pay him any more attention. Instead, they talked about the things that happened in the city in the past 2 days. It's true. Many people saw it. It was really a young man. A moment ago, the alchemist said that the young man was not qualified to appear in front of the city lord's mansion. The next moment, the young man took out 2 badges and put them on his chest, making the alchemist unable to say a word. It was really a slap in the face. That was 2 holy master badges. Not to mention our city, no one in other cities has the ability to get 2 holy master badges. So awesome? What kind of young man is he? Could he be some old monster? Another person asked curiously while eating peanuts. Old monster? Impossible, impossible. That's clearly a handsome young man wearing an extremely dazzling red robe. His entire person is like a demon, unbelievably good-looking. A man at another table said with a smile, "Not bad, not bad. I know that red-clothed young man. When I was drinking with a friend that day, I saw him riding a strange horse into the city. At that time, I saw that the young man's appearance was extremely outstanding and he was riding a strange horse, so I took a second look." When the man eating by the window heard this, he was stunned for a moment. He turned his head to look at the man who spoke and asked, "Brother, is that red-clothed young man riding a strange white horse with horns on its head?" "Not bad. Not bad. It's a strange white horse with horns on its head. Brother, have you seen it before?" The man asked in surprise. The black-clothed man's face revealed a smile, but it was covered by his beard, so it wasn't too clear. He didn't answer, but asked, "You said that this person was in front of the city lord's mansion? Could it be that he had gone to the city lord's mansion? Is he still in the city or has he left?" "In the city lord's mansion. Because the old city lord was so ill that all the doctors were helpless. That red-robed young master came out of nowhere and was invited into the city lord's mansion yesterday. He should still be in the city lord's mansion now. Thank you for telling me." He stood up and clasped his fist. He took out 2 gold coins and placed them on the table. He called for the waiter to collect the money and then walked out with his broadsword. Seeing the black-robed man's figure moving like the wind, the few people couldn't help but feel a chill in their hearts. They thought to themselves, "Who is this person? Why was his aura so frightening?" In front of the city lord's mansion, a burly man dressed in black stood there with a long saber in his hand like a door god. He raised his head and glanced at the words, "City Lord's Mansion." No one knew what he was thinking, but there was a smile and joy in his eyes. However, the 2 guards in front of the door involuntarily swallowed their saliva in the face of this burly man who had suddenly appeared in front of the city governor's mansion and was holding a large blade in his hand. They stared at him vigilantly. Chapter 1555. I'm looking for someone. He glanced at the 2 guards and said, "Go in and report that I'm the elder brother of the red-robed young master." Hearing this, the 2 guards looked at each other, and one of them quickly went in. The elder brother of the red-robed young master? After hearing this, Mayor Duan asked someone to invite the person outside in. When he saw the burly man in black with a biting cold aura, his eyes narrowed. When he saw this man, he smelled a strong smell of blood. When he looked again, he only felt that this man had a biting cold aura. His steps were steady, and his figure was tall and straight like a pine tree. However, there was a murderous aura around him, and he gave people the feeling that he was not to be trifled with. He stared at this man with suspicion in his heart. That Master Feng was tall and slender, and he had the noble aura of an elegant young master. His red robe was flamboyant and unrestrained, and he was enchanting and eye-catching, making him unforgettable. The man in front of him was dressed in black, and he had the back of a tiger and the waist of a bear. He was majestic and ferocious, and his face was untrimmed. His muscles were well-developed, and he was full of explosive power. His steps were steady, and his aura was restrained, but he gave people the feeling that he had an extremely strong combat ability. No matter how you looked at it, this man did not resemble the enchanting Master Feng at all. How could these two people be brothers? How should I address you? Mayor Duan, who was sitting in the main seat, asked after sizing him up. My name is Guan Shilin. He sat down and put his broadsword aside. He took a sip of the tea that the servant had brought him to moisten his throat, and then asked, Mayor Duan, where is my brother now? Mayor Duan heard this, and his eyes moved slightly. He asked, you said that your surname is Guan? Hearing this, Guan Shilin knew that he had misunderstood. So he laughed loudly and said, he and I are sworn brothers, so of course we have different surnames. Mayor Duan, you don't have to worry. I won't randomly acknowledge this brother. Oh, then what is your brother's surname? He asked again. Seeing this, Guan Shilin glanced at him and smiled meaningfully. Her surname is Feng, and some people call her the Ghost Doctor. If you don't believe me, you can ask her to meet me, and she will know that I am not lying. Hearing this, City Master Duan was 70% convinced. His attitude immediately became friendly. I see. Forgive my rudeness. Brother Guan, this way please. I'll take you to see young Master Feng. Thank you for your trouble. Guan Shilin raised his broadsword and cupped his fists in a salute, then walked out beside him. Master, the butler called out. He stepped forward and whispered a few words, but no one knew what he was talking about. After listening to the housekeeper's words, Master Duan said apologetically to Guan Shilin, Brother Guan, I have some matters to attend to. I'll get the butler to take you there. Sure, Mayor Duan, go ahead, Guan Shilin said. It didn't matter who led the way, as long as he could see Xiaojiu. Thus, the butler took Guan Shilin to the courtyard. When they reached the courtyard, the butler was about to speak when Guan Shilin said, This is the courtyard. All right then, I'll go in by myself. You can go back. The butler was stunned for a moment, then hurriedly said, Master Guan, is there a formation inside? Or, he was interrupted before he could finish. Formation? It's fine, I'm just going to try it out. Go ahead. Don't disturb us brothers from catching up. Guan Shilin waved his hand and walked in. Chapter 1556. He had traveled extensively with the mercenaries from the black market for so long that he had done some research on formations. He did not think that he would be stumped by a formation. He wanted to try to walk in, and he thought that it should be a formation set up by Fengjiu, but he didn't think that it was set up by the Duan family. After entering the formation, he walked in a few circles, but in the end, he still walked in. As soon as he entered, he saw a small garden. A petite woman wearing a plain dress was watering the plants in the garden with her back facing him. He thought that she was Fengjiu's servant girl, so he called out to her. Hey! Girl over there. Come over here. Who knew that when his rough voice came out, the person on the other side didn't even have the slightest bit of reaction and was still watering there. Hence, he walked over and shouted again, Little girl, I'm talking to you. There was still no response. So he walked into the garden and patted her shoulder from behind. Hey! Duan Yingying, who was watering the spiritual herbs in the garden, was suddenly patted on the shoulder. She thought that it was Fengjiu, but when she turned around to look, she was so frightened that her shoulders shrank back and the watering pot in her hand fell to the ground. Looking at the tall and burly man with a frightening beard in front of her, her face turned pale and her body went limp and fell to the ground. What's going on? Do I look that scary? Guan Shilin frowned and reached out to catch the person who had fainted. He carried her to the pavilion. Just as he was about to find someone to take the little girl away, he heard footsteps coming in his direction. He turned around and saw a red figure leaping into his sight. Little Nine! He shouted in pleasant surprise, waving at the person who had come. Hearing the voice, Fengjiu was stunned. When his gaze fell on the person in the pavilion, his eyes filled with surprise and he could not help but smile. Brother, why are you here? She quickly ran forward and arrived at the pavilion, only to see Duan Yingying unconscious. She couldn't help but point at her and ask, What happened to her? Little Nine, I really didn't expect you to be here. When I was eating in a restaurant in the city, I heard the people outside talking about you. When I heard those people's descriptions, I knew it was you." He patted her shoulder with his large hand. "Other than becoming stronger, you haven't changed much." "Oh, that's right, this little girl fainted because of me." "Fainted because of you?" Fangzhou was stunned, but when his eyes fell on his bearded face, he couldn't help laughing. "Brother, look at you. At least fix your beard. Fortunately, it's daytime. If it's night, it's even scarier. Didn't I have no time to trim my beard when I was out on a mission? Besides, I'm used to it. All the men I hang out with are men. Which one of them isn't like this?" He stroked the beard on his face and said, "I don't look that scary, but I actually scared a little girl until she fainted." "She's not a little girl. She's the mayor's eldest daughter, Duan Yingying," Fangzhou said with a smile. "Oh, she's the mayor's daughter? I thought she was one of your servants. When I came in and asked her where you were, she didn't even respond. Not only is she timid, she also has a bad temper." Chapter 1557. She's deaf and mute? Guan Shilin was surprised and looked at the girl lying on the stone table with her eyes closed. If Xiao Zhou had not mentioned it, he would not have been able to tell. Moreover, this girl was quite pretty. Yes, she's the eldest daughter of the Duan residents, Duan Yingying. She also has a twin sister named Duan Linlin. Although the two sisters look the same, their lives are different. She has lived here alone since she was young, and this courtyard is hers. I just took the opportunity to move in." Hearing this, Guan Shilin nodded. He looked at the girl and expressed sympathy in his heart, but he did not say anything. Instead, he looked away from the girl and gestured for Fangzhou to sit down. "Xiao Zhou, sit down. Let's have a good chat. Why did you come to Duan City? I heard from the people outside that you're here to treat City Lord Duan's illness. Is there something you need?" "Brother, you really know me well." She smiled and said, "We haven't seen each other for a long time. You don't know how many things have happened in the past 2 years. Let me tell you, that year when I left the academy, the siblings had not seen each other for a long time." So Fengzhou roughly told him what had happened. In the end, after hearing Fengzhou's story, Guan Shilin nodded in realization. "So that's how it is. No wonder I met you here. So you came here because of the exquisite rainbow flower. However, even though you've experienced a lot in these 2 years, you've finally found your mother. She's still alive, isn't she?" She sighed softly and said, "Yes, nothing else is important. As long as my mother is still alive, I believe that everything will pass." "Oh right, didn't you say that you found some clues about your father? Did you find anything after that?" she asked. Guan Shilin shook his head and said, "No. It's as difficult as finding a needle in a haystack." He paused and looked at her and said, "Xiao Zhou, sometimes I can't help but wonder if my father didn't want to come back. Otherwise, why hasn't he come back for so many years?" "Brother, don't give up. You must have faith in your heart. Whether he comes back or not, didn't you say that you must find him?" "That's right. I once said that I must find him. I must find him," he said firmly and then laughed. All right, let's not talk about this. Xiao Zhou, does that mean you found my adoptive mother? So when are you going back?" "I'll go back with you. The 7 colors exquisite flower is here, but I still have to go to Sky Mountain to find another spiritual medicine. Once I find all of these spiritual medicines and get rid of the poison in my mother's body, I will go back. I think my father will be very happy to see us all go back together." Thinking of that scene, she couldn't help but look forward to it, hoping that day would come soon. "That's for sure." He nodded and said, "Since you want to go to Heaven Mountain, I'll go with you. We'll go home together then." "All right, but I still have to go to the Yen Palace to look for Xiaoza. He went there to settle some matters some time ago. I'm thinking of going to the Yen Palace after I'm done here, and then we can go to the Sky Mountain together." Chapter 1558. Hearing this, Fangzhou smiled and looked at him. Seeing that he had already reached the peak of the Martial Saint rank, he couldn't help but smile. "Big brother, it seems that you've had a fortuitous encounter this time. Now that you've reached the peak of the martial saint rank, you're very powerful. That's right, I've had a fortuitous encounter, he replied. It was because of this fortuitous encounter that his powers had advanced so quickly. Otherwise, based on his normal cultivation speed, it would have taken him more than 10 years to reach the peak of the martial saint rank. Just then, Duan Yingying, who had been lying on the table, woke up. When she opened her eyes and saw the extremely frightening large man standing next to her, she was so frightened that she fell to the ground. Yingying, don't be afraid. He's my big brother. Fangzhou hurriedly stepped forward to help her up as he picked up a pen from the table and wrote something on a piece of paper. However, even after seeing what Fangzhou had written, she was still frightened. Her hands clutched tightly to the corner of Fangzhou's clothes as she hid behind him. She's so timid, Guan Shilin said. She hasn't interacted with many people. Fangzhou patted her hand and wrote on the paper again, if you're afraid, go back to your room first. I'll have a chat with him. Duan Yingying nodded when she saw what he had written. Then, she lifted her skirt and quickly ran out of the pavilion. Because she had turned around in a panic, she tripped and almost fell to the ground. Hey! Be careful! Fangzhou instinctively shouted. Then, he realized that she couldn't hear him and smiled helplessly. Guan Shilin saw that the man had left, then looked at Fangzhou and smiled. Xiaozhou, how did this little girl catch your eye? You seem to treat her quite well. She caught my eye. She smiled. The two of them sat down at the table and chatted. Not long after, she brought him to the small garden to look at the exquisite rainbow flower. It's that spiritual medicine. Governor Duan has already said that he'll be able to gather all the ingredients in 3 days. Then we'll leave once we're done. No problem, he replied. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw that Duan Yingying, who had left earlier, had returned with a tray in her hands. Look, she's here again. He gestured for her to look behind her. Duan Yingying, who was dressed in a plain dress, was holding a tray in her hands. She had her head lowered. She didn't dare to look at Guan Shilin's, as if she couldn't get used to such a frightening man in this courtyard. When Fangzhou saw her, she smiled and walked towards her. Yingying, did you go to cook for us? She gestured and made a gesture of thanks. Duan Yingying smiled at Shilin's Shuez. She's Yingying, Yingying. Yingying soon that's s that she's Duan, tsssest, est, s she's yinked, t, ss that. Isn't it just that I have a bit too much beard that I haven't trimmed? It's not that frightening, is it? He didn't quite understand. He always walked around like this outside. His appearance was very proper. How was he frightening? You're not frightening? You've always had a burly physique, but it's changed in the past 2 years. But that's true. Cultivating profound energy will affect your body. Hearing her words, Guan Shilin lowered his head to look at himself and smiled. I think this is actually pretty good. I can even scare people a little. Chapter 1559. Shaolin. Why are you the only one back? Where's your brother? Didn't you bring some people with you when you left? Why didn't they escort you back? City Lord Duan asked his daughter, whose complexion was not too good. His voice was filled with concern. I went to look for Big Brother, but he wasn't there. They said that he went out with the team to gain experience, so I left him a letter and came back first. But something happened on the way back. A few guards died in order to protect me. I even met another person on the way back. Speaking to there. She suddenly stopped. Her face was filled with anger. I also met someone on the way back. We agreed to travel together, but who would have thought that person would set his eyes on my treasures? In the end, I was so angry that I killed him. She did not dare to say that she had been taken advantage of, so she could only change her story. Since that person was dead, no one would know that she had almost been taken advantage of. As for that red-clothed young master, who knew where he ran off to? They definitely would not meet again. So it's like that. City Lord Duan nodded and let out a sigh of relief. It's good that you're back safe and sound. Next time, just let the guards do these things. Fortunately, you're fine this time. I know. Next time I go out, I'll definitely bring more people. Hearing that, City Lord Duan smiled. He thought of the matter with Fengjiu and said, "That's right. There's an important guest in the family. You can't offend the important guest." "What important guest?" she asked curiously. "He is an esteemed guest who came to treat your grandfather's illness. He is someone who possesses both the Alchemy Saint Master and Alchemy Saint Master emblems. Right now, he is living in your elder sister's courtyard. Since you have returned, you should pay your elder sister a visit later." "Is that person a man or a woman? Why is he living in my sister's courtyard? Does that person not know that my sister is mute and deaf?" "Look at what you're saying. No matter what, she's still your sister from the same mother. How can you say that?" City Lord Duan scolded in a deep voice. Duan Lin curled her lips. "I didn't say anything wrong. She's mute and deaf. She can't hear me when I talk to her. I'm too lazy to sit with her." She stood up and pushed him out of the door. "Daddy, I want to take a hot bath and rest. Go. Don't nag here. You're getting more and more impudent." City Lord Duan shook his head and walked out of the room. As soon as he stepped out, the door closed with a bang, causing him to sigh helplessly. This child has been spoiled rotten by them. When he thought of his eldest daughter, he felt a little guilty. For so many years, because she was deaf and mute, she had never participated in any of the family's banquets and rarely appeared in front of outsiders. Over time, everyone outside knew that he had a daughter, but they didn't know that there was another daughter in the courtyard who couldn't speak or hear. Speaking of which, he didn't care about her as much as their eldest brother. The reason why Ying was able to live in that courtyard was because his eldest son personally asked his father, saying that Ying's personality was gentle, kind, and optimistic. It was best for her to live in that courtyard and take care of the flowers and herbs. For so many years, once she had something to do, it was like she was cut off from the rest of the world. She didn't know anything that happened in the manor. Chapter 1560. At noon, Master Duan came to the courtyard to invite Fengjiu and Guan Shilin to the front of the courtyard for lunch. However, instead of Fengjiu, he saw Guan Shilin in the pavilion in the garden. He was slightly surprised and stepped forward to ask, "Brother Guan, what are you doing here?" Guan Shilin opened his eyes and stood up when he saw who it was. "So it's Master Duan. What brings you here? Is there something you need?" "It's like this. I wanted to invite the two of you to the front of the courtyard for lunch." "Lunch? There's no need for that. My little brother is busy right now. She told me not to disturb her. Besides, this courtyard is quite nice. We don't lack anything." Hearing this, Master Duan's eyes flashed. "I see. All right then. Then I won't disturb you." He nodded and turned to leave. However, after taking 2 steps, he stopped and turned back with a smile. "If there's anything you need, feel free to look for me. Thank you for taking care of my daughter while she's here." "Don't worry, Master Duan." He nodded. After watching him leave, he sat back down and closed his eyes to cultivate. Meanwhile, in Fengjiu's room, she was concentrating on mixing medicinal liquids. The bottles and jars on the table were filled with various medicinal essences. The entire room was filled with a strong medicinal smell. Because there were only the 3 of them in this courtyard, after Fengjiu told her to go into the room to mix the medicine, Guan Shilin was cultivating in the pavilion. Duan Ying, who was free, remembered Fengjiu's words and didn't disturb them. However, she thought that they would be hungry when it was time to eat, so she prepared the meal first. She didn't send the meal to Fengjiu's room because Fengjiu told her not to disturb her before she came out. As for the man named Guan Shilin, she was very afraid of him. Especially when Fengjiu wasn't around, she didn't dare to send the meal over. Because of this, she stood in the kitchen in a daze, not knowing what to do. After hesitating for a long time, she left a portion for Fengjiu, placed the food on the table outside the kitchen, and went to the front to look for Guan Shilin. Guan Shilin, who was cultivating with his eyes closed, heard footsteps approaching. He exhaled softly and opened his eyes. He saw the girl who was hesitating about whether she should go forward with a piece of paper in her hand. He was stunned for a moment. He took it and looked at it. It said, "Brother Guan, it's time to eat." He was surprised when he saw the words on it. After all, this little girl was very timid, and Xiao Zhou was not here. He thought that she would hide far away from him. Thus he grinned and stood up. "All right, let's go eat. Let's go." He gestured and watched as she swallowed her saliva and took a few steps back. He then smiled and strode into the kitchen. Duan Yingying was afraid because the man was so strong that it scared her. He looked like a bear and was very scary. She didn't want to be alone with him, so she walked around Fengzhou's room to see if she had come out. When she first saw Fengzhou, she knew that she was a girl because she had a faint feminine scent. When she saw that Fengzhou's door was not open, she paused for a moment and then walked into the kitchen. However, when she arrived at the kitchen and saw what was happening, she was stunned. She stood to the side and watched. Chapter 1561. When he saw Duan Yingying standing there, he said, "I've finished everything." Then he remembered that she couldn't hear him, so he gestured again. Duan Yingying came back to her senses, glanced at him, and went to clean up the table. Guan Shilin was a little embarrassed. After all, she wasn't a servant, and it wasn't right for her to cook and clean the table, so he helped to bring the food into the kitchen. When he saw the food in the kitchen, he thought that it was for Xiaozhou, so he smiled and said, "Actually, you don't have to leave it for her. She might leave her room tonight, so she won't need to eat when she gets busy." When he saw her tilting her head and looking at him blankly, he realized and smiled. "I forgot that you can't hear. Have you eaten?" He gestured as if he was eating. Duan Yingying looked at him, took a step back, shook her head, and then nodded. "Have you eaten or not? If you haven't, you can eat Xiaozhou's portion. You really don't have to leave it for her. She definitely won't come out." He pointed at the food on the side, but she looked at him defensively, as if she didn't know what he was talking about. Seeing this, he thought that he should leave first. He couldn't communicate with her anyway. However, just as he was about to turn and leave, he heard her stomach grumble. He couldn't help but be stunned. "You really didn't eat?" He was really embarrassed this time. The food was cooked by others, and he actually finished it by himself. She didn't eat? When he thought of this and saw that this little girl was guarding against him, he didn't say anything more. He walked around the kitchen, not caring if she could hear him or not, and said, "Since it's like this, I'll cook a bowl of noodles for you. Consider it as a thank you for cooking for us." Duan Yingying stood to the side. She only saw Guan Shilin's mouth move, but couldn't hear what he was saying. She should have left, but she stayed out of curiosity. She saw him looking around the kitchen, and then he began to knead the noodles. Seeing such a burly man busying himself in the kitchen, she only felt that this scene was very strange. As time passed, she watched him make noodles, add soup, eggs, meat, and other things like that. Finally, he brought out a big bowl of noodles. Was he still not full? Just as she was thinking about this, she saw him waving at her. She paused for a moment and saw him pointing at the bowl of noodles, gesturing for her to eat quickly. She was stunned, with her eyes and mouth wide open in disbelief. She quickly took out a pen and paper and wrote a question. "For me?" Guan Shilin nodded and took the paper from her. He smiled and wrote, "Try it." She nodded at Guan and then continued to eat, her eyes zzz. She nodded and nodded. She continued to eat. She continued to eat the noodles s. She, teat her tes eat. Seeing that she was eating happily, Guan Shilin quietly left and walked towards the small garden, intending to stretch his body. As for Fengzhou, just as Guan Shilin expected, she didn't leave the room until evening. When she came out, she had a bright smile on her face, and it was obvious that she had successfully concocted the medicine. Chapter 1562. It hadn't even been half a day, right? The two of them seemed to be getting along quite well. Did something happen while she was gone? Did something happen that she didn't know about? "Brother, why is Yingying playing chess with you here?" she asked as she walked over. Guan Shilin was just thinking about his next move when he saw her. He quickly waved at her with a smile. "Xiaozhou, come, sit down. Tell me what move I should make." He was relatively good at cultivation, but he rarely played this kind of chess game. After playing 3 games, he lost all 3 games in a row. His face was about to be lost to his family. How can I do that? I can't help you with this. She sat down beside him and looked at their chess pieces. She smiled. Brother, you'll lose no matter how you play. You're almost at a dead end. All right, I admit defeat. I'm no match for you. He waved at Duan Yingying, indicating that he was done playing. Brother, why is Yingying playing chess with you here? She doesn't seem to be afraid of you anymore. What did you do? Feng Jiu asked curiously. She asked me to eat after she finished cooking. I thought she had already eaten, so I finished all the food. Then, I heard her stomach growling, so I made her a bowl of noodles. This little girl is easy to bribe. Her attitude towards me changed so much after a bowl of noodles. At this point, he grinned and felt that it was a little unbelievable. So a bowl of noodles could ease her fear of him. It seemed that he wasn't that scary after all. I'll go cook. Duan Yingying smiled at the two of them. She wrote something on the paper and was about to stand up, but Feng Jiu pressed her down and sat her back down. Let's not eat here today. Let's go out and eat. We can walk around the night market while we're at it. Feng Jiu suggested. Sure. Guan Shilin agreed. Duan Yingying couldn't hear what they were talking about. She was confused until she saw Feng Jiu write something on the paper. She wrote something down in surprise and asked, I can go too? Of course, I'll bring you along. You just have to let your father know. Feng Jiu wrote, I'll do it. Guan Shilin stood up and walked outside. Let's go, I'll take you to change. She pulled her to her room and picked out a light green dress for her. After changing into a light green dress, she looked much gentler. On the other hand, the Duan family head was stunned when he heard Guan Shilin's words. Brother Guan, you're saying that you're taking Yingying outside? That's right, we'll be eating out tonight. We'll probably be back later, but don't worry, City Lord. We'll definitely send Miss Duan back safely, he said in a deep voice. The Duan family's patriarch quickly nodded. All right, no problem. I'll have to trouble you with my daughter. It's my duty. He nodded and turned to leave. The city lord looked at his back view as he left. He was a little confused. Why was this pair of brothers so strange? On the other hand, Feng Jiu held Yingying's hand as they walked out of the courtyard and towards the front yard. When they were waiting for her brother, they bumped into Duan Linlin, the second daughter of the Duan family. It's you? Why are you at my house? Duan Linlin, who was about to look for her father, didn't look at her twin sister. Instead, she stared at the dazzling young man in red. Chapter 1563. When she thought about how he had seen her naked appearance, her face immediately turned red and green. She did not dare to look at Feng Jiu again and only felt her face burning with embarrassment. When Duan Yingying saw her, she happily went forward to hold her hand and gestured, silently calling her sister. However, she was flung away. She staggered and almost fell to the ground. Fortunately, Feng Jiu supported her. Why are you pulling me? Duan Linlin glared at her unhappily. She didn't treat her as an elder sister at all. In her opinion, this elder sister who was born earlier than her was a disgrace. Moreover, it was a disgrace who looked exactly like her. Duan Yingying, who was flung away, lowered her head sadly and quietly stood beside Feng Jiu, not moving forward. Although she couldn't hear or speak, her mind was sensitive. She knew that her sister did not like her. Feng Jiu only glanced at Duan Linlin indifferently, then left with Yingying. She did not have a good impression of Duan Linlin, so she did not even have the interest to talk to her. Seeing the young man in red holding her sister's hand and leaving, Duan Linlin could not help but shout, Hey, who are you? Why are you in my house? What's wrong? Who is this? A deep and displeased voice sounded. The unfamiliar voice startled Duan Linlin and she turned around. When she saw a tall and sturdy man with a large beard walking towards her, her face turned pale and she quickly retreated to the side. Who are you? Duan Linlin asked with a trembling voice. Brother, let's go. Feng Jiu called out, indicating for him to ignore her. Guan Shilin nodded, glanced at the face that was exactly the same as Duan Yingying's, then looked away. He walked past her and came to Feng Jiu's side. I've already told the mayor. Let's go. Seeing the three of them walk out of the mansion, she could not help but open her mouth, her face full of shock. Her deaf-mute elder sister had not stepped out of the city lord's manor for so many years. If she went out like this, would the people outside think that she was her? Thinking of this, her face instantly turned ugly. She immediately ran to her father's courtyard, intending to ask for an explanation. On the other side, Feng Zhou and Guan Shilin brought Duan Yingying, who was out for the first time, to the street. Duan Yingying couldn't hide her curiosity when she saw the trinkets displayed on both sides of the street. She walked and looked around, occasionally stopping to play with them. She actually bought a lot of things. Isn't that the red-clothed young master? He's a venerable with 2 sacred master emblems. I didn't expect him to come out for a stroll today. It's really a surprise to see him. Look at that woman in the middle. Isn't that the city lord's daughter, Duan Linlin? She is the #1 beauty in our city. Her facial features are really outstanding, and her temperament is very gentle. She is really beautiful. But who is that bearded man? Why are you following us? It seems like he might be a bodyguard or something. Listening to the whispers of the people around them, the three of them found a restaurant by the window and sat down after shopping. They ordered a few dishes and wine to eat while admiring the lively night view of the people coming and going on the street outside. That night, the most excited person could be said to be Duan Yingying. That night, she saw things that she had not seen for a long time, and finally saw how wonderful the outside world was. Chapter 1564. Seeing the red figure disappear into the main gate of the city lord's manor, for people in gray walked out from the shadows. One of them asked, "Why didn't you make a move? With our strength, it's more than enough to take her life. This is the city lord's territory, so there's no rush. She'll leave this place so we can make a move on the road." One of them said, "That's right, we can set a trap on the road and wait for her to jump in. She's just a woman. How powerful can she be? Leave 2 people to keep an eye on her. Remember, don't get too close to avoid being discovered." One of them said and left 2 people to keep watch, while the other 2 quietly left in the night. As for Feng Zhou and the others, the city lord was still waiting for them when they returned to the mansion. When he saw the 3 of them enter the mansion, the city lord, who had been waiting in the front yard, came to them. After glancing at his daughter, he looked at Feng Zhou and asked, "Young Master Feng, have you all eaten supper? I've asked the kitchen to prepare it for you." "Thank you, City Lord, we just ate outside and came back," Feng Zhou said and smiled apologetically. "If we knew you were waiting here, we would have come back earlier. Hee, it's fine, it's fine." He waved his hand and said, "Oh right, the medicine is all here. That's good. I'll go over tomorrow morning. It's getting late, so we should go back and rest," she said and nodded before walking forward. Yingying looked at her father and smiled at him before leaving with Feng Zhou. Guan Shilin laughed loudly and said to the city lord, "City Lord, rest early." After saying that, he also left. After returning to the courtyard, the 3 of them each took a bath. Feng Zhou found Guan Shilin, "Brother, I'm going to help Yingying with her acupuncture tonight. Help me guard her." "Okay, don't worry, leave it to me," he replied and went to Yingying's room with her. Feng Zhou pushed the door open and went in. She saw Yingying in her underwear waiting for her. She smiled and walked to the table to write a sentence. "Don't be nervous," Duan Yingying nodded, but she still swallowed her saliva from time to time. She couldn't help but feel nervous. Today, when they were outside, Feng Zhou said that he could cure her deafness and muteness. She was stunned when she heard it. Could it be cured? Her brother had found many people to treat these people, but no one said that they could cure her. She thought that she would be like this for the rest of her life, forever unable to hear the voice of the world, unable to hear the voice of her family, unable to make a sound. She didn't dare to have extravagant hopes, but when Feng Zhou said that she could cure it, she almost didn't dare to believe it. Even so, her heart still held a trace of hope. Feng Zhou told her that he could cure her deafness and muteness. She only had one request, and that was to not tell anyone that her deafness and muteness was cured. She wanted her to listen to the voices around her and see the attitude of her family. She even told her that if she could find someone who didn't mind her deafness and muteness, she could give her life to him. She even told her that when her deafness and muteness were cured, she could go out more and see the scenery of other places. She didn't want to stay in this courtyard forever. She also told her that when her deafness and muteness were cured, the blocked veins in her body would be able to circulate again and she could start cultivating. Chapter 1565. Drink this medicine and lie down on the bed. Fengjiu gestured as he handed her a bottle of medicine and took out a silver needle from his space. Duan Yingying took it and drank the medicine without hesitation. She then lay down on the bed with her hands on her abdomen and looked at him nervously. Fengjiu smiled at her, took out a needle and inserted it into her fainting point, then began to perform acupuncture on her. Because the main places to perform acupuncture were the head and behind the ears, and because Yingying was nervous, he could only make her unconscious so that she wouldn't move around due to nervousness. Acupuncture on the head had to be done with the most care, as the slightest carelessness could cause a mistake. Since it was a matter of life and death, she naturally couldn't be careless. Because of this, she had her brother stand guard outside. This way, even if someone disturbed her, it wouldn't affect her acupuncture. That night, Fengjiu was treating Yingying, while Guan Shilin sat cross-legged outside the room. In the main courtyard, Mayor Duan couldn't sleep because of his nervousness. Tomorrow was the day for his father's treatment. Could he really be cured? Even if Master Feng said that there was no problem, he still couldn't relax until the results were out. As for Duan Linlin, she was so annoyed that she couldn't sleep. In the evening, she went to find her father and found out that the young man in red was here to treat her grandfather. Her father also told her not to offend him. However, when she thought of what happened on the road, she couldn't pretend that nothing happened. What was even more hateful was that the young man with the surname Feng was so good to her deaf and mute sister. He even took her out to play. Why? That night, she couldn't sleep the entire night. In the middle of the night, Fengjiu came out of Yingying's room. Seeing Guan Shilin standing up, she smiled and said, "Brother, go back to sleep. How's that little girl? When will she see the results?" He asked. "When she wakes up tomorrow, if nothing unexpected happens, her hearing will gradually recover. She should be able to hear clearly in about a day or so. As for her vocal cords, she'll be able to speak when she wakes up tomorrow. However, she probably hasn't spoken for so many years, so it'll be difficult at first." Hearing this, Guan Shilin smiled and nodded, saying, "That little girl is lucky to have met a ghost doctor like you. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to think about it in this lifetime. That's because she and I are fated. Look at the other one, although they look exactly the same, I don't have any good feelings for her." She smiled and stretched her waist and shook her hands. "I have to go back to sleep. I still have to treat that old man Duan in the morning." Guan Shilin nodded. "Go. Don't worry and sleep. I'll wake you tomorrow." "Okay. Then I'll go back to my room first." She then walked into her room. Duan Linlin and Duan Linlin and Dun Duan Linlin ants. "Yingying, how are you feeling today? Is there anything different?" She smiled and asked as she came to her side. Duan Yingying looked at her and listened to her voice. Her ears buzzed as if there were some sounds, but she couldn't hear them clearly. Even so, she was overjoyed. She habitually took out a pen and paper, wanting to tell Fengjiu that she could hear some sounds. However, Fengjiu stopped her from writing and smiled at her. Chapter 1566. Duan Yingying nervously moved her lips and carefully called out, Fengjiu." When the hoarse voice carefully came out of her mouth, although the voice was hoarse and unpleasant to the ear, it still made her so excited that tears flowed out. I can speak? I can speak." Her hands tightly grasped Fengjiu's hand as she spoke with a trembling voice. She was so excited and happy that she couldn't control herself. Guan Shilin on the side laughed loudly. "This is nothing. If Xiaojiu says that he can cure you, then he can definitely cure you." He was extremely confident in his sister's medical skills. In this world, his sister could definitely cure any illness that others couldn't. Fangzhou revealed a smile and said, "Because you haven't spoken for a long time, your voice will be hoarse. But don't worry, when you eat more nourishing food, your voice will slowly recover." Duan Yingying nodded. Her ears still couldn't hear clearly, but she could vaguely hear it. For her, this was already something she didn't dare to hope for in the past. Remember, don't speak in front of others. Calm down and cook some nourishing food to eat. Here is a bottle of medicinal liquid. Take it 3 times a day. She took out a bottle of medicinal liquid and gave it to her, then said, "We will probably be back in the evening, you don't have to wait." After that, she went out with Guan Shilin. Today, the treatment for old Master Duan was in another family's ice cellar, so they had to go out. When they reached the front yard, the Duan family's master, who had been waiting for a long time, saw Fengzhou come out and sighed in relief. He hurriedly walked up. "Young Master Feng, everything is ready. We can set off now." Fengzhou nodded and walked out with him. They got into the carriage that was prepared outside and went to the other family's residence together. On the Meng family's side, the Meng family's master knew that they would come today, so he waited outside the manor. When he saw the carriage slowly approaching, his gaze swept past the front and landed on the carriage behind. The one sitting inside should be that red-clothed youngster with 2 sacred expert emblems, right? The carriage in front stopped, and City Lord Duan got down first. He cupped his hands and smiled at the Meng family head. "Brother Meng, sorry to disturb you today. It's nothing." He smiled and cupped his hands, saying, "The ice bed is ready. We're just waiting for you, City Lord." After a brief exchange of pleasantries, Governor Duan ordered his men to bring his unconscious father to the Meng family's ice cellar. Guan Shilin was the first to step out of the carriage, followed by Fengzhou, who was dressed in a dazzling red robe. Although he knew that it was a young man, the Meng family's patriarch was still surprised when he saw the handsome young man in his 20s. It was really so small. This must be young Master Feng. The Meng family's patriarch stepped forward and cupped his hands in greeting. He smiled and said, "Seeing you in person is better than hearing about you." Fengzhou looked at the person in front of him and nodded with a smile. Master Meng. City Lord Duan had mentioned him before. "Young Master Feng, please come in." He gestured for him to enter and then turned to the side to invite him in. At this time, he noticed the black-clothed man beside him. He couldn't help but be surprised and secretly sized him up. Chapter 1567. Seeing him staring at Guan Shilin, Fengzhou just smiled faintly and walked in with him. Mayor Duan first led his people to follow Patriarch Meng's people to the ice cellar, then Fengzhou and the others followed. Patriarch Meng glanced at Fengzhou, then said to the mayor, "If there's anything else you need, just say it. If it's within my ability, I won't refuse." Hearing this, the mayor's impression of the Meng family deepened. He nodded and smiled. "Brother Meng, don't worry. If there's anything I need, I won't be polite. You've helped me a lot this time. If there's anything I can help you with in the future, don't hesitate to ask." Ha ha ha, the mayor's words are too serious. Patriarch Meng was delighted. He knew that after this incident, Mayor Duan wouldn't sit idly by if anything happened to the Meng family in the future. This was enough. When they arrived at the ice cellar, Fengzhou stopped in his tracks. "Mayor, just follow me in. The rest of you stay outside. If the door isn't opened from the inside, no one is allowed to come in." "Don't worry. With me here, no one will mess around." Guan Shilin laughed heartily and patted his chest to reassure her. Fengzhou smiled and nodded to him. Then, he and Mayor Duan pushed open the stone door and entered the ice cellar. As soon as they entered, the cold air hit them in the face. Their whole body was quickly filled with cold air, and all the pores on their body seemed to open. Feeling the strong cold air, she immediately circulated her spiritual energy and circulated it through her veins. After a while, her whole body warmed up. Mayor Duan also circulated his spiritual energy to protect his body. He looked at Fengzhou and asked, "Young Master Feng, do you need me to do anything? Take off your father's clothes." As Feng Zhou spoke, she glanced at the table beside her. She had asked her to put it here so that it would be convenient for her to arrange her things. Okay. Governor Duan personally stepped forward to take off his unconscious father's clothes. After all, there was no one here who could do such a thing. However, the closer he got to the millennium-chilling ice bed, the more bone-chilling cold he felt. Especially when he saw his half-naked father lying on the ice bed with a thin layer of ice gradually condensing on his body and face. He became even more worried. In such a cold place, he didn't have any spiritual energy to protect his body. Could his body bear it? Would there be any problems with his body? Thinking, he asked worriedly, "Young Master Feng, my father doesn't have any spiritual energy to protect his body. Is it really okay for him to lie on the millennium-chilling ice bed like this?" Feng Zhou frowned slightly, glanced at him and said, "City Lord Duan, since you've asked me to treat your father, don't question my method. Besides, I haven't made a move yet, but if I do, I hope you won't make any noise to disturb me." As she spoke, she picked up a small knife and wiped it. She looked at him and said, "Actually, I alone am enough for this treatment. I asked you to come in because I want you to personally see how I treat your father. However, if you disturb me halfway, then this treatment will fail and your father's life will be ruined." Chapter 1568. At this moment, the dignified city lord lowered his head and apologized like a child who had done something wrong. Feng Zhou did not say anything else and only said to the city lord, "First, seal your father's acupuncture points." Okay. The city lord responded and condensed spiritual power in his fingers to seal his father's acupuncture points. Then he retreated to the side and waited for Feng Zhou's next instructions. At this moment, Feng Zhou stepped forward and inserted the silver needles into every acupoint. Then, she stretched her hand toward Old Master Duan's waist as if she was looking for something. When she felt the wriggling under his skin, she inserted the silver needles between her fingers into his body. The city lord did not dare to disturb them, and even his breathing became lighter. When he saw Feng Zhou's silver needle pierce a wriggling worm that was as thick as a finger, he could not help but feel his heart skip a beat. He could feel that the worm that was nailed to the ground by the silver needle could not move, but it was still alive. After nailing one of the worms, he could even see the other side of the worm wriggling. Almost in an instant, the worm that was not nailed to the ground moved under his skin and flesh and then disappeared, as if it had moved to another place. At this moment, he saw Feng Zhou take the spirit medicine with both hands, pluck the leaves of the spirit medicine, crush it, and drip the medicine juice. Then, she poured the medicine juice into his father's mouth, nose, and ears. Finally, she injected the ice attribute contained in the 2 ice attribute crystal cores into his father's body. In an instant, he saw his father's body, which was originally covered in a thin layer of ice, quickly stiffen. The blood in his body was gradually frozen and the blood in his body could not circulate. In addition, the extremely cold 1,000-year chilling ice bed was transmitting 1,000-year chilling ice chi under his body. In almost a moment, he felt his father's breath. At this moment, his heart stopped. He wanted to go forward and stop them, but he forced himself to endure. His hands were tightly clenched into fists as he stood there. At this moment, he only felt a bone-chilling cold. It was as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. The only thing that echoed in his mind was, "His father is dead." He didn't know how much time had passed, but when he saw Feng Zhou use another silver needle to pierce his father's body, as if nailing something, he could only hear the sound of his own saliva swallowing and the sound of his heart beating like thunder. City Lord Duan, unseal his acupoints. Feng Zhou's hands were busy. He used his spiritual power to remove the frost on Father Duan's body, while using his spiritual power to protect his heart meridian. However, after she spoke, she did not see any movement from City Lord Duan. Thus, she raised her head and frowned as she shouted, "City Lord Duan, quickly unseal your father's acupoints." "Ah? Oh yes, yes." He suddenly came back to his senses and hurriedly unsealed the acupoints that were previously sealed. After unsealing them, He saw her using the sharp knife from before to cut his father's body. Perhaps it was because the 1,000-year chilling ice bed was too cold and the person lying on it was almost frozen stiff. The moment the knife cut, he saw a small trace of blood seeping out. Then, he saw Fengjiu pull out a golden worm that was pierced by a silver needle from between the skin and flesh. When he saw the golden worm, his heart jumped violently. Only then did he realize that although his father's breathing was extremely weak, he had recovered a trace of vitality. Chapter 1569. Unlike the atmosphere in the ice cellar, Mayor Meng didn't leave. Instead, he stood outside the ice cellar and looked at the burly man at the stone door. He smiled and said, "How should I address you?" Guan Shilin, who was guarding the stone door like a guardian, glanced at him and said, "My surname is Guan. Oh, so it's Brother Guan." Patriarch Meng nodded and said with a smile, "I see that young Master Feng trusts you a lot. Is Brother Guan one of young Master Feng's people?" Hearing this, Guan Shilin smiled. He knew that Patriarch Meng was trying to get information out of him, so he only said, "Yes, I'm sure I'm one of her people. I'm responsible for her safety." "I see." Patriarch Meng looked at him and said, "But judging from Brother Guan's aura, you don't seem like an ordinary guard. I think you must have a big background." "Ha ha ha, Patriarch Meng, you're mistaken. In fact, I'm just a mercenary who's trying to make a living. I don't have much of a background." He laughed loudly and chatted with him casually, just to pass the time. On the other side, Duan Linlin, who took advantage of the fact that Feng Jiu and the others were not in the city lord mansion, ran to Duan Yingying's courtyard. After searching everywhere, she found her sister, who looked exactly like her, was in the kitchen. Thus, she angrily walked forward and pulled her out. When she was outside, she forcefully flung her hand and flung her away. She angrily shouted, "Let me ask you, why is that young man in red living in the same courtyard as you? Don't forget that you're deaf and mute. You can't afford to offend someone like that." Duan Yingying looked at her in a daze. Hearing her sister's words, she couldn't help but lower her head and stand there helplessly. "Yes, how could I forget that you're deaf and mute? It'd be strange if you could hear me. Scolding you is a waste of time and energy." She snorted and glared at her, then turned and left. Duan Yingying raised her head and looked at her sister's angry figure leaving. She lowered her eyes and turned back to the kitchen to cook. She had never thought of comparing herself to others. Living in this courtyard, she endured loneliness alone. Even if she was unhappy, she would still smile. In the past, she had always been the only one living in this courtyard. In this family, the only one who could make her happy and make her worry was her elder brother, who only came back once or twice a year. As for the others, she already knew that they all treated her as invisible and didn't like her existence, right? On the contrary, Fengjiu treated her so well even though she was just a passerby. Not only did he cure her deafness and muteness, he also taught her to see through people. Just as Guandage said, she was lucky. It was because of her luck that she was able to meet Fengjiu, the person who changed her life. Afternoon, the stone door of the Meng family's ice house finally opened from the inside. The first to walk out was Fengjiu, dressed in red. His expression was the same as before, but there was a hint of fatigue between his brows. "Done? Are you tired? If you're tired, go back and rest." Guan Shilin was the first to go up to Fengjiu's side. As soon as he got close, he could feel the cold air around him and immediately frowned. "The cold air around you is very strong." As he spoke, he looked at the Meng family head and said, "Meng family head, can I trouble you to have someone check if the ginger soup I asked you to make is ready?" Okay. I'll have someone check the kitchen right away. Should be ready." As he spoke, he ordered someone to check the kitchen. Chapter 1570. Young Master Feng, why don't you rest in my humble abode first? Family Head Meng suggested. "Thank you for your kindness, Family Head Meng. I'm fine. I'll rest in the carriage for a while." She thanked him with a smile, nodded at him and walked out first. City Lord Duan, who walked out behind her, seemed to be dizzy. After seeing this scene with his own eyes, the feelings in his heart were indescribable. After instructing people to send his father back to the city lord mansion, he said goodbye to family head Meng and then went out. Family head Meng naturally sent him off. However, when they arrived outside, they were stunned when they saw the scene outside. They saw that a large number of people had gathered in front of the Meng mansion. These people were all wearing badges. They were either pharmacists or alchemists. They blocked the road. Could be said that even if they wanted to go back, there was no way for the carriage to leave. At the very front of these people, there were two people they recognized. They were the two rather famous saint expert-level alchemists and pharmacists in the city. Only, when they saw their formation, it made City Lord Duan and Meng family's patriarch a bit surprised. What were they doing here? Get out of the way. If you don't get out of the way, I won't be polite. A low voice with anger entered their ears. Only then did they notice that Fengjiu and Guan Shilin's carriage was still there. Moreover, it was surrounded and couldn't get out at all. They immediately stepped forward and came in front of the two alchemists. The two of you, what's going on? Did something happen? City Lord Duan asked with a trace of doubt in his eyes. When the two saw the City Lord come out, they looked at each other and said, City Lord, we heard that a young man with 2 saint badges came to the city, so we came to take a look, because some alchemists suspect that his badges are fake. Hearing this, family head Meng was stunned and looked at City Lord Duan. After being stunned for a while, City Lord Duan smiled and said, You two worry too much. Even if I didn't check young Master Feng's 2 badges, I know that the 2 badges are definitely not fake. Because his strength and ability are there, there's no way they can be faked. As he spoke, he paused and said, You two have been staying here for a long time, so you probably don't know. Today is the day that young Master Feng treated my father. Moreover, the treatment has already ended, and we are preparing to go home. My father's disease has also been cured by young Master Feng. I saw all of this with my own eyes. Your father's disease has been cured? Can you let us take a look? One of them asked. This, I'm afraid not. He hesitated, but he still refused. If we didn't see it with our own eyes, how can you expect us to believe that it's true? The other person also spoke, his attitude very resolute. Why should I let you see it with your own eyes? Whether you believe it or not, what? A clear and cold voice that carried a trace of laziness sounded from the other carriage, making everyone who heard this voice feel a wave of anger. This was especially true for the 2 sacred experts in the lead, who even more so felt like their dignity was being insulted. Humph! The 2 of us are alchemists in the city, the leaders of all alchemists and pharmacists. If someone really dares to pretend to be alchemists, we won't let them off easily. Chapter 1571. You're not allowed to leave. A shout rang out as 2 sacred masters blocked the carriage. The surrounding alchemists and pharmacists who felt that the situation wasn't serious enough all surrounded the carriage and blocked the road, as if they didn't want the person in the carriage to leave just like that. City Lord Duan saw that the development of the situation was a little unexpected, and his face couldn't help but darken as he frowned. His sharp gaze swept across the crowd as he asked in a deep voice, What are you all doing? Why aren't you all retreating? Of course, he only dared to shout at those alchemists and pharmacists. He didn't dare to shout at those 2 sacred masters. After all, the status of a sacred master wasn't inferior to him, the city lord. City lord, this person is very likely to be a fake. If that's really the case, then we definitely can't sit by and do nothing. The 2 sacred masters looked at the city lord and said in a deep voice, Please forgive us, city lord. However, at this time, Guan Shilin had already driven the carriage forward. Looking at those people blocking the road, he snorted coldly and swung the horsewhip in his hand forward. With a show sound, it cracked in the air before it was pulled back and swung to the left and right. Pa! Pa! The sharp whip made 2 slapping sounds. When those alchemists saw this, they didn't dare to block the carriage and retreated. Even if they were unwilling, they didn't want to be whipped for no reason. However, just as the carriage moved forward, the 2 sacred masters' faces darkened. No one had ever dared to disrespect them like this. Immediately, the two of them shouted in a deep voice, "Stop them!" As soon as the voice fell, two nascent soul powerhouses appeared out of nowhere and blocked the road. Seeing the two nascent soul powerhouses appear, the surrounding alchemists quickly retreated with joy in their hearts. Let's see how they can leave this time. A young man could hold two sacred master badges? They definitely had reason to believe that the badges were fake. "Drag the young man in the carriage out for me," one of the sacred masters shouted in a deep voice as he stared at the carriage with a sharp gaze. What an arrogant young man. In front of these two sacred experts, he actually dared to avoid them and hide inside. Feng Zhou was wronged. They left the Meng Mansion and the carriage stopped directly in front of the Meng Mansion. Feng Zhou got into the carriage and Guan Shilin chased the coachman away. Feng Zhou got into the carriage and Guan Shilin asked him to be the coachman. Feng Zhou got into the carriage and walked for a while before they were surrounded by people. Speaking of which, the current situation was really not caused by them. Moreover, they had already retreated time and time again. Who would have thought that these people would not let go, and each and every one of them would treat them as soft persimmons to pinch? With that, he saw the two nascent soul cultivators charging at the carriage. His eyes turned cold and he extended his hand. In a flash of light, his long saber appeared in his hand. "I'll let you have a taste of my blade." A low and deep voice that contained a powerful, profound energy aura was emitted. Once the pressure of a martial saint was released, a powerful airflow enveloped the entire area, causing the faces of the alchemists to change. One by one, they retreated in shock. They were good at refining pills and making medicine, but they weren't good at fighting. They had always stayed as far away from these people as possible. If they were careless and got injured, they would have nowhere to cry. Whoosh! Whoosh! Chapter 1572. Hearing the commotion outside, Feng Zhou lifted the curtain and stood aside, leaning against the carriage to watch her brother fight with the two people. He was now a martial saint at the pinnacle, and he had experienced real combat outside, so his combat power should be stronger than her grandfather's. She hadn't seen him fight for a long time, and now she wanted to see if he could fight against two nascent soul cultivators alone. Looking outside, she saw that one of the two nascent soul cultivators was tangling with him, and the other was grabbing towards her, as if trying to pull her off the carriage. Seeing this scene, she curled her lips and glanced at the two alchemists and pharmacists wearing the Sage Master's badge. Guan Shilin waved the large saber in his hand and slashed at the side of one of the nascent soul cultivators. The nascent soul cultivator in front of him couldn't dodge in time, and his robe was cut open, and blood seeped out from the side of his waist. "Damn it! How dare you hurt me!" He was a nascent soul cultivator at the pinnacle, and in a two-on-one situation he was injured by the other party. This made him so angry that he wanted to kill Guan Shilin. He immediately pulled out his long sword, and with a shake of the sword's tip, he stabbed towards Guan Shilin with a fierce, murderous aura. However, after Guan Shilin swung his saber, he quickly retreated and swung his saber horizontally, blocking the other man's hand that was about to grab the carriage. The man could only feel the sharp blade coming down from above. The killing intent and the smell of blood in the air frightened him. If he hadn't instinctively retracted his hand would have fallen to the ground from the chop. "Subdue him first." The two nascent soul cultivators looked at each other and said, and attacked Guan Shilin together. On the side, City Lord Duan and family Lord Meng were stunned, and their eyes were filled with disbelief. Guan Shilin was only a martial saint at the pinnacle. Although his strength was not low, he cultivated dark force aura, so how could he be a match for a spiritual power cultivator? But he was able to calmly deal with two nascent soul cultivators by himself, and force them to join forces. This kind of combat power really shocked them. Ice Blade! One of the nascent soul cultivators let out a roar and poured spiritual power into his sword. Sword chi flew out and condensed into an icicle in the air. The icicle shot towards the target before anyone could react. Beast Flame! The other nascent soul cultivator also shouted. After he pulled out his sword, his other hand suddenly attacked Guan Shilin. With a whoosh, a stream of spiritual energy burst out from his palm and formed a flame in the air, forming a flaming beast with its mouth wide open. It fiercely pounced on Guan Shilin as if it wanted to swallow him whole. Spiritual power cultivators could use the attributes in their bodies to attack, but profound chi cultivators could only use profound chi and martial force. Their bodies were not categorized into attributes, only strength and speed. However, there were very few mystics who could truly combine strength and speed. As a result, mystics were generally weaker than spirit cultivators. However, the scene before their eyes completely refreshed their understanding of mystics. Chapter 1573. The tip of the blade that exuded a strong stench of blood was pointed at his forehead. The distance between them was less than a finger's length. This extremely close distance caused large beads of cold sweat to appear on the nascent soul cultivator's forehead. He couldn't help but gulp, and his heart began to pound. When the other nascent soul cultivator saw this scene, he couldn't help but stop. He looked at the black-robed man with a complicated gaze. It was undeniable that after this exchange, they truly admired his combat strength from the bottom of their hearts. When experts exchanged blows, their strength could be seen as soon as they made a move. This Xian cultivator's combat strength was definitely above theirs. However, when they stopped, not far away from the crowd, a few black-robed men who were standing in a corner saw the scene in front of them. The eyes of the leader moved, and he gave some instructions to the people behind him. Then he leaped up and attacked Fengjiu in the carriage. As the sacred master commands, "Drag the person in the carriage out." A sudden shout sounded, startling everyone. They looked in the direction of the voice and saw several black-robed men rush out. They stepped on the shoulders of the alchemists and arrived in front of them to grab Fengjiu in the carriage. Seeing this scene and hearing those words, the two sacred masters were slightly shocked. They looked at each other, but didn't say anything. They both thought that they were on the other side, but they didn't expect that someone was using their name to cause trouble. On the contrary, when they saw those people come out, they snorted heavily and shouted, "That's right, drag him out. This brat is too arrogant. We must teach him a lesson today." If the two of them, sacred masters, suffered a loss of face at the hands of this youth, how could they face others in the future? Moreover, this youth's two sacred master badges were definitely fake. How could they, as sacred masters, let such a person go? Caring Ling frowned. He had already shown mercy, but these people still wanted to come again? "The two of you, please tell them to stop. They can't." Before the city lord could finish speaking, he was stunned by the scene in front of him. Although the several black-clothed men made the action of pulling people out of the carriage, in the next moment, they held a long sword in their hands and with bloodthirsty ferocity, they stabbed towards Fengjiu in the carriage. Seeing this scene, he was so shocked that his heart jumped. He immediately shouted, "Stop!" His figure had already rushed out, trying to stop that person's assassination. At this time, the others also realized that something was wrong. After the Meng family's master recovered from his shock, he quickly stepped forward to help. He stopped one of the black-robed men and shouted in a deep voice, "Who are you? How dare you try to assassinate me in front of my residence?" Clang! The sound of swords clashing against swords filled the air with a sharp killing intent. When the alchemists and pharmacists saw the black-robed men's killing moves, they couldn't help but turn pale and retreat in all directions. The two sacred experts even more so widened their eyes in horror as they looked at the other party, asking at the same time, your people? How is this possible?" The two of them spoke at the same time. They shook their heads vigorously and even took a step back. "I thought it was your men." When they heard this, the two's faces turned pale. They knew that the situation was bad. Even if they wanted to teach that youth a lesson, they didn't think that if that youth died here, the two of them wouldn't be able to escape responsibility. Chapter 1574. Guan Shilin sensed a bloodthirsty murderous aura emanating from them when he saw them draw their swords and stab his sister with murderous intent. He was very familiar with this kind of bloodthirsty murderous aura, but he didn't expect to see it here. Without much thought, he changed the direction of the saber in his hand and slashed at one of the black-robed men. "Your opponent is here." Whoosh! The sharp energy of the saber shot out, creating a terrifying airflow in the air. The black-robed man in front couldn't dodge in time, or perhaps he didn't expect Guan Shilin's speed to be so fast. When he turned around, all he saw was the saber slashing down at him. Hiss! A shrill scream, accompanied by a strong smell of blood, spread in the air. The sharp sound was as unpleasant as the squeal of a pig being slaughtered, causing everyone to tremble in fear. They saw an arm being flung out and thrown into the air before falling to the ground, staining the ground red with blood. The face of the cultivator who had his arm chopped off was twisted and pale, and his hatred was obvious. At that moment, Guan Shilin waved his saber, and his body moved like the wind, arriving in front of the carriage. He waved his saber horizontally in front of him, pointing it diagonally at the ground. His sharp eyes were filled with intimidating pressure as he stared at the black-robed men, and his low voice was filled with murderous intent. "How dare you? How dare you murder people here? Who are you? How dare you assassinate people here?" City Governor Duan and the Meng family head also shouted sternly. They surrounded the carriage and protected Fengjiu, who was in the carriage. They felt that Fengjiu had no combat ability. However, after two of the black-robed men died, the leader stared at Fengjiu, who was sitting in the carriage with deep eyes and a faint smile. He glanced at the people protecting the carriage, gritted his teeth, and blew the whistle in his hand. A sharp and loud whistle rang out, and in just a few breaths' time, 20 to 30 black-robed men surged out from all directions. The weakest among them was at the nascent soul stage, while the strongest was at the fairy realm. Furthermore, there were not just one or two fairy realm experts, but seeing this valiant group of assassins, the Duan family head's expression changed slightly. He was worried that his father's safety in the carriage would be threatened, so he immediately shouted to the people accompanying him, "Send them into the Meng mansion first." When the people saw his gaze fall on the carriage where the old city governor was, they understood and protected the carriage. They escorted the people and the carriage into the Meng mansion, and then closed the gate of the Meng mansion. Facing dozens of powerhouses, including 4 fairy realm masters, was the Meng, and he didn't dare to ask the Meng family's men to come out to help. He couldn't let people to protect Fangzhou's people. Of the mansion, S's Meng's people, Meng of the family, force from the Meng mansion. To protect the Meng, Meng the people in the mansion of them. Of people, S's peoples to protect S Meng. Among them, after all, his relationship with the Meng family was not that deep, and there was no relationship of mutual benefit that he had to protect him. If the situation was too difficult to control, he still wanted to leave and not get involved in this mess. The black-robed men did not care about City Governor Duan's order to send the other carriage into the Meng mansion. Their target was the red-robed youth sitting in the carriage, Fengjiu. Their mission was to take his life. Chapter 1575. Hearing this, Mayor Duan and family head Meng looked at each other, and their hearts skipped a beat. These people were all dressed in black, so it was impossible to tell which force they were from. However, their strength, especially the strength of dozens of people, was enough to make them wary. However, if they were to retreat at this time, it would be immoral, especially for Mayor Duan. Fengjiu had just cured his father. If he were to leave him alone and watch him get killed, he would be criticized. After weighing the pros and cons in his heart, Mayor Duan said loudly, "You'd better leave quickly. Otherwise, don't blame us for being impolite." "Ha ha ha ha. Good. I'd like to see what ability you have to protect her." One of the leaders raised his head and laughed. He raised his hand and made a gesture. The dozens of black-clothed people around him rushed forward and attacked the carriage. "Kill! Kill! Kill! Kill!" Fierce shouts containing monstrous killing intent came out from the mouths of the men in black. They no longer concealed their auras. The killing intent and the smell of blood on the men in black were even more terrifying. The surrounding people seemed to be shocked. They didn't even dare to breathe loudly and quickly retreated. In the face of such a situation, Guanshelin was as calm as ever as he brandished his saber to meet the enemy. His gaze swept past the nascent soul cultivators and landed on the leaders. His eyes moved slightly as he knew that if he wanted to defeat the enemy, he would have to kill the leaders first. Therefore, when he saw those people rushing forward, he aimed his saber at one of the fairy realm cultivators. As for his sister, he believed that these people could not hurt her. Whoosh! Whoosh! His figure moved and the aura of his saber rang out sharply. Guanshelin rushed into the midst of the black-clothed people alone and slashed with his saber. Every strike of his saber brought about a strong and fierce airflow. Clang! Crack! The sound of saber and sword colliding rang out. The swords in the black-clothed people's hands broke after a cracking sound. Having lost their weapons, it was even more difficult for them to resist Guanshelin, who was as fierce as a tiger and had explosive combat strength. One by one, the corpses fell to the ground. Thick blood permeated the air, and the visible broken limbs made people tremble in fear. Once again, they were shocked by Guanshelin's fighting strength. The morale of Mayor Duan and the Meng family's patriarch was greatly boosted when they saw this. With the addition of some people from their families, the situation quickly turned around. At this moment, Fengjiu, who was in the carriage, saw that two of the 4 fairy realm powerhouses were about to attack Guanshelin from behind. She turned her palm, and 2 silver needles with spiritual power shot out from her hand. Swoosh! The 2 fairy realm experts, who were about to launch a sneak attack, heard the faint noise behind them, and when they turned around to take a look, they waved their sleeves and blocked the 2 silver needles. At the same time, their sinister gazes swept past the crowd and glared at the red-clothed youth in the carriage. This time, the 2 of them tacitly attacked at the same time. They no longer paid attention to the bystanders and directly attacked the red-clothed youth. A palm strike struck out and split the carriage in half. Bang! Boom! The carriage fell to the ground. When Mayor Duan and the Meng family's patriarch heard the noise, their hearts tightened. When they turned around, they saw the 2 fairy realm powerhouses standing in front of the broken pieces of the carriage. Fengjiu, who had been sitting in the carriage, was nowhere to be found. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.